Hello everyone! So, today in this video, we'll be exploring the fundamentals of microeconomics, specifically focusing on the concepts of demand and supply. So, whether you're an IB student or simply someone who's interested in demand and supply, or like the fundamental principles of economics, this video is for you. Yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so before I delve into the intricacies of demand and supply, let's take a moment to understand what microeconomics is. So this is like the first video you should be watching before, doing other topics on microeconomics. So, microeconomics is the branch of economics that studies the behavior of individuals, households, and firms in making decisions regarding the allocation of scarce resources. So it helps us understand how buyers and sellers interact in markets and how their decisions impact the overall economy. So now let's move on to one of the fundamental building blocks of microeconomics. Demand. Okay, so demand usually refers to the quantity of a good or service that consumers are willing and able to buy at a given price over a specific period. So in simpler terms, it's kind of like its desire and ability to purchase a particular product. So here's the definition I got from Google, and you can read it. Okay, so, and this is another definition from a website I love called Investopedia, and you could take a look at the definition here: an economic principle referring to a consumer's good desire to purchase goods and services and willingness to pay a price for a specific good or service. So, the key words that you should actually write when, if you're given a test, it's like define demand, right? You have to add the words desire or willingness at one point when you're like answering, because that's like the main point of it, the desire to purchase or willingness to pay, Okay, so hence there is a law of demand. You would think there's only laws in science and maths. No, there's also a law in economics. So there's a law of demand. So basically it's really simple. When the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down, and the relationship is inverse. So vice versa. When the price goes down, the quantity demanded goes up. So, for example, right? The price of chicken nuggets goes up. Nobody wants to buy expensive chicken nuggets. Not a lot of people are willing to buy expensive chicken nuggets, right? But if chicken nuggets gets priced down, people desire it more. People are more willing to pay for it. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, so if you want to be fancy, you could say it like this, with the words ending with ceteris paribus, which basically means with other conditions remaining the same or being constant. So, yeah. So this is the demand curve. D for down. Remember, it's a downward sloping curve. Because if you take a look at this, right, at this point, the price is this much, right? If you know basic graphs in mathematics, I think this should be pretty easy to understand, right? The more you go up the y-axis, it's higher in value, right? So when the high value of P, here, and then Q goes down here. Less quantity demanded, high price, right? But more quantity demanded when price is low. So that is basically what the law of demand states. Okay, so demand is influenced by several factors. And one of the key determinants is price, right? So as the price of a product increases, quantity demanded typically decreases, and vice versa, right? So this is a price determinant, a movement along the curve. So you can see from this, right? It moves. You can make it move, right? I'll explain it all later. It'll make sense. So this is basically like the good or service's price, and there are things called non-price determinants. So with these, they affect the whole curve. So they shift the whole curve. And I'll show you a diagram of it later. So some factors can be like consumers' income, tastes and preferences, price-related goods, expectations, and so on. So here is the price determinant. So demand curve movement along the demand curve. So for example, right, if an iPhone is priced at P1, quantity demanded would be Q1, right? Not a lot of people want it. Not a lot of people are willing to pay for such an expensive product, right? But then if Apple, wants to be nice and, they price it down to P2, thank you, the quantity demanded would be Q2. Like, oh my God, the iPhone is so cheap, I'm going to buy it. So it's an inverse relationship. You see that? It's a movement along the curve. The points are like shift, So these movements, you could just say it moves along the curve, but you could also be fancy and you could say a contraction along the demand curve and the extension along the demand curve when it goes like left or when it goes right. So it works the same vice versa. Pretty sure this is quite self-explanatory. Okay, let's move on. So there's something called the non-price determinants. Here, some determinants are like income, taste and preferences, price of substitutes and complements, and demographic changes. So income, for example, like if someone's wage increases, if someone's income increases, they're willing and they desire more products, right? Because they're able to spend more money. And tastes and preferences, like likings and dislikes, like if you don't like if the whole society was brainwashed to thinking like, oh wait, this is not a good example. I'm so sorry. Okay, wait. Let's see, like Case-to-Fi phone cases, like they're really popular. Like a lot of influencers do like ads on them. So like, the demand of it would increase because, taste and preferences and like trends, right? So price of substitutes and complements, I'll get to it later, and demographic changes. It's like population and stuff like that. There are more non-price determinants, of course. This is just a few. So here's an example with a substitute. So this scenario is Coca-Cola raises their prices, right? So essentially what a substitute means is like a product or service that consumers see as essentially the same or similar enough to another product. Kind of like a substitute teacher. But that's like out of the thing. But, put simply, a substitute is a good that can be used in place of another. See, I wanted to think of another example other than Coca-Cola and Pepsi because that's such an easy example, but I couldn't think of anything. Yeah, so anyways. So let's say that Coca-Cola increased their prices to P1, P2. They're like, I'm going to make my drink more expensive. You know what? Not a lot of people are going to buy it anymore. People are like, oh, that's so expensive. I don't want that anymore. I'm going to switch over to Pepsi. So the demand for Pepsi just increases. As you can see, like it shifts, right? This is not price determining because Pepsi is not changing their price. It's Coca-Cola, right? So, I don't think I'm super good at explaining. So if you look at this graph that I got from the internet, like most things, I think you'll be able to understand how the shifts work, right? Okay. So moving on, here is an example with complements. So complementary goods are products which are bought and used together. Just like bread and butter, right? Okay, the bread and butter doesn't look so appetizing in the pictures that I chose, but, right? So for instance, right, this bread manufacturer is like, I'm going to raise the prices to P2, right? And not a lot of people want to buy it anymore. They're like, wow, I don't want that, right? So the complementary good, butter, shifts left because since bread is more expensive and not a lot of people buy it anymore, why buy butter, right? Why buy butter? Because that's probably the only thing you can use that for. I'm kidding. But that's essentially the idea. And so I love this website. Just pause the video and take a look at this. I'm not going to do any explaining. Like, this is quite self-explanatory. Okay, so moving on to supply. So supply is the amount of resources that firms, producers, laborers, providers of financial assets, or other economic agents are willing, again, that word, and able to provide goods and services. And it goes up. So hence the law of supply. As price increases, quantity supplied increases. As price falls, quantity supplied falls, right? So if a firm is like, if they can sell chicken nuggets for like much higher, they want to provide more. Like, they can provide more. That's basically the idea. So the law of supply: as the price of a good or service increases, the quantity of goods or services that suppliers offer will increase, vice versa. So sky for supply, upward sloping curve. So here's some, of course, supply also has a price determinant, right? Movement along the curve, but I'm not going to explain that there because I'm pretty sure you guys already know the general idea of how that works with the supply curve if you understand the law of supply. So here are some of the non-price determinants. So changes to the cost of production, like wages, income, and factors of production, just anything. And changes to indirect taxes and subsidies. You don't really need to know this now if you're like still learning about demand and supply, but you'll get to it in like government intervention. So changes to technology, changes to the number of firms, weather events, future price expectations, goods in joint and competitive supply. So, for example, right, changes to technology would be, okay, so for instance, you're at S1. You are at S1. Your factory is at S1, right? But then you purchase a super cool, like, robot AI machine that just makes, like, every product in, like, 2 seconds, right? So then your supply curve would shift to the right on S3 because that robot makes so many things. So another example would be weather events, right? So you're at S1 again, right? You're making potatoes, but then there's a huge hurricane that like kills your potato farm. So the quantity supplied will decrease, right? So the S1 would shift to S2, leftward shift, less supplied, okay? So just take a look at this, pause, amazing picture. Okay, now then you can add these two together, supply and demand, creating a equilibrium point. Equilibrium is important to create both a balanced market and an efficient market. Allocatively efficient. Yes, optimal. Great. So you guessed it. Yeah, they both can move. Look at that. Oh, and it can get real ugly. Look at that. And that is it. I will share some pictures of my notes on the next few slides so you can just take a screenshot of it. Thank you for watching. Yay.